It's the 10th of March 2015, and this is the audio podcast, episode 144, Tap Trio Treat.
Welcome back, Scott Hewitt, after your 1 week absence. I'm Samuel Freeman and Adam Janch. How's it going?
Yeah, it's going okay. Yes, audio podcast, of course. You can follow our notes. This week's show is 144, entitled Tap Trio Treat, and you can get to the notes at theaudiopodcast.co.uk/show/144.
And then you will get links to all the things we are talking about, which begins with news. And the first item of news is a new piece of software, from Waves. It's called Tracks Live, and it's a multi-track recorder intended for use in live situations. Imagine that.
Indeed. But if you actually go to this, the website linked from the notes, I mean, it kind of tells you a little bit about it, but that's it. I mean, there's no, you don't even get a good picture of the actual software.
Yeah, and even if you play the embedded video there, it doesn't tell you much very early. It's kind of, I had to dig quite a bit on this, but if you go to the download page, it's a free download, and the source code appears to be available. I was able to download it by signing in to Waves, but I haven't looked at it. Yeah, but so you can get the software for free and run it. But if you pay $99, then you get technical support and also priority updates. And currently, for a limited time, although they don't say how limited, you'll get a free copy of Waves multi-rack software, which is normally $600. So, yeah.
That's their way into the market.
It is. Go on.
What does multi-rack do?
Well, yeah, it's a good question. Last time I mentioned, it was me. I brought Waves up recently when they had something else, and they were talking. Oh yeah, when they were cross-grading from their native to their other type of things. What's the name of their hardware that I brought up last time? Products, SoundGrid. Their SoundGrid systems. Yep. So Waves really seems to be pushing into encouraging people to use their plugins in real-time situations in live performance rather than just in studio. So getting their plugins out of the DAW and into live racks, which is kind of cool, I think. And
yeah, because you can use the multi-rack, SoundGrid directly with something like an X32 or Persona Studio Live systems, Midas Venice, Macchionics as well. So.
But is multi-rack, say you were going to buy Tracks Live and get multi-rack for free, is multi-rack something that you can just use, if you don't have any other Waves products, or is it something that's like an update, you need to have SoundGrid or some other Waves things to make it actually worth it?
I think you can run it. You can run multi-rack on a computer. You could just run it on a Mac Mini or whatever. Obviously, the thing is that you're limited because it's processing and it's processing as fast as possible. So you're going to have a limited number of plugins that you can use simultaneously. It all depends on processing power, but it will run on other. As far as I can tell, I'm not an expert on this. I've done a bit of reading yesterday and today, and that's as far as I can tell. It seems to be the case.
Now, if you are kind of worried that you don't have enough processing power, well, I'm not sure if Apple's new range of computers announced yesterday are going to help you very much, but let's go into them anyway.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about these. So
you see, this is the interesting thing is that I wasn't following the keynote because I tend to get annoyed with keynotes, but I saw the news as it was coming in, maybe a couple of hours behind, and there were some interesting things. The main one being Apple's not reveal, but confirmation and pricing of Apple Watch models. That's not relevant to us. But I didn't see any news. No one was interested on Facebook. No one I know on Facebook mentioned at all Apple or any Apple product last night. There's a little bit of talk on Twitter, but it didn't seem to generate a huge amount of buzz. The significant thing for us in the audio podcast is computers, and specifically, there's the return of the MacBook. Ooh. But it's a different kettle of fish. Have either of you seen the new MacBook?
Yes, and retina screen, incredibly thin, all that sort of stuff, which is kind of good. But then there's the new USB port as well, isn't there? The Type-C USB port.
This is the controversial thing. It's yes, a new type of USB port that's been in preparation for a while. Apple are usually the first to put new ports on their computers. Unfortunately, in this case, it is at the basically they're putting one USB-C port on their computer, one headphone jack, and that's it. All the other ports have been removed, and I just don't know. I'm just so confused as to.
Have they've taken the Thunderbolt port off as well?
Yeah, there's one. They've taken the charging port off. There's one port that's not the headphone jack, and that's one USB-C port, and that's for charging and peripherals. All the peripherals you'll need. Apple are hoping that you'd use their wireless technologies to take the onus off needing to use USB for such things. So AirDrop for file transfer and other types of things like using Bluetooth and these kinds of things. But still, two ports would be nice. Also announced has been a $79 dongle. So basically this is going to be a computer you need to automatically spend $80 more on because you're going to need a dongle, which plugs into the USB-C port, provides one USB-C port to charge, I guess, one HDMI port for video output, and one extra USB 3 port. So
that's amazing.
Which is ridiculous. You're actually losing your C port to get one USB 3 connector on a B jack. I mean, what on earth? I don't get it. I don't get it, Scott.
Just be glad that you're not part of like some sort of business who have been panicking their way through to getting Thunderbolt support sorted out for sound cards, because that's looking like a bad bet.
Fortunately, you might be able to run Thunderbolt over USB-C because it's an open standard. So
I would agree with that.
That'll be brilliant if you want to run FireWire on one of these. You have a USB-C to Thunderbolt connector, and then you have a Thunderbolt to FireWire connector, and probably Thunderbolt 800, FireWire 800 to FireWire 400. So you're going to be converting about 4 times. Fantastic. But the important thing to note is that the MacBook Airs are still, they're still around. The MacBook Pro with Retina and with non-Retina still around. Most of those have also received an update for their CPUs. Not a huge amount of processing increase. It's the Broadwell architecture, so a bit more battery life, I think, is to be gained from those models, and those were updated yesterday too. So
yeah,
15-inch MacBook Pros will be updated later in the year, I heard.
Is that to remove all of their universal support in favour of this not so universal 3 thing?
Yes. Take all the ports off the side of the machine.
I mean,
it's the next update.
I think what we'll find, my gut feeling is that Apple are going to replace the MacBook Air line with this new MacBook line for the low end, but they're going to continue using, we'll get MacBook Retinas with MacBook Pro Retina screens with USB-C on them, but they'll have all the ports, all the ports you need. So they're not going to make only computers with one port, because that would be suicide.
It gives the Pro part of the name perhaps a bit more meaning again. Like maybe
has ports.
You can have a MacBook which is just gives you access to our operating system, or you can have a MacBook Pro that'll let you actually do things.
It won't be the MacBook Pro. It'll be the MacBook ports.
MacBook with extra ports. Yeah.
Well, but okay. So a couple of quick things. I'm saying, obviously, when you see the thinness of the machine, you can see why they've got to have this one one USB-C type port there, because there isn't room for anything else, is there? So there's that thing. And Thunderbolt is not getting traction at all in anything but the Mac world, and Apple probably realized that in the same way that FireWire died, Thunderbolt will die if they can't get anybody else to get on board with it properly, and they've pretty much failed in that. Like, nobody else is on board with Thunderbolt, so
I like Thunderbolt.
Oh no, like Thunderbolt, like FireWire, is great technology, and like FireWire is almost certainly doomed. Like,
FireWire was around for a long time before it died. It's only recently that it was only Thunderbolt that killed off FireWire in a way.
Oh yeah, well yeah, but what I mean is they never, I mean, the idea that you would end up with FireWire printers and things like this just never, and that's part of the problem, wasn't it? You ended up having to have all these different things. So the consolidation makes sense, but this is horrible for the user. But then it's only horrible for the user who actually needs anything else. Like, the only thing I plug into my Mac is my sound card, and I plug a sound card in, I plug a webcam in, so that's all to do with this. And then I also, I have a separate kind of keyboard and stuff, because I don't like using the Mac keyboard, so I have a keyboard plugged into it as well.
The problem with that is you're already, if you want to charge at the same time, you've already run out of ports, even with a dongle. So,
well, precisely. But the point I'm making is I could use a Bluetooth keyboard and mouse. Well, I'm actually using a Bluetooth trackpad anyway, so and a Bluetooth keyboard. I could do that, and if the sound card would have to come in, but but then they maybe want rid of the sound card. I think this might actually be kind of related to the story we just had, because I was sitting there thinking the Wave story is kind of like the return to proprietary hardware that does particular jobs, in the same way that like the old DigiDesign core systems and stuff like that had those sort of features inside them. And you kind of wonder if those people have been looking at the Apple kind of platform and thinking, how are we ever going to plug anything into these machines again? Then maybe they've just been super smart, because now you build your own piece of hardware that people connect to and work with, and then you control it remotely from the general purpose computer, and that's the new solution. And
it's all going through RJ45 connectors, because Ethernet wires are kind of
everywhere.
Yeah, but not in the new Mac.
Not the new Macs.
And in fact, the only Mac laptop that will have an RJ45 is the still available MacBook Pro without Retina, which still has a CD drive, still has a spinning hard drive. It has all those niceties, but is probably the heaviest of the bunch of the computers. I mean, the Apple's like this dogma about having the thinnest laptop, and it's just pointless. I just don't get it. The MacBook Air is fine.
You're not the target audience, so that's the thing. They want to push you into buying a Mac Pro.
Well, yeah, I'm not the target audience because I need the extra facilities of a MacBook Pro, but I did have a MacBook Air, and even then I was limited because that was one that didn't have Thunderbolt, so I only had 2 USB ports, and I thought that was sometimes not quite enough. It doesn't have a networking port, it didn't have but it was just enough for me, but the actual machine itself was light enough, thin enough. It doesn't need to be ultra thin. I just don't get it. I don't understand why it's important for something to be. It's a laptop. It doesn't have to be ultra thin. We'll get to the point where they're making laptops so thin that you get paper cuts when you pick it up.
Yeah.
Well, wasn't there a thing immediately after the last Apple thing, and the new iPhone that was so thin it was bending in people's pockets and stuff?
Oh yeah, that's right. Was it the current one, the new one, the 6?
Perhaps.
Yeah, and it's just like thinness to a point, and then it just becomes like this pointless thing that you're chasing for no real gain. Like, I would much rather have a MacBook with 2 USB-C ports or 3 USB-C ports and make it slightly thicker, and you could have that many USB-C ports, and then it makes sense.
But I suspect the bandwidth of the USB, I'm saying, this USB-C port is a USB 3 edition, isn't it? And it's a physical compatibility problem, not a software compatibility problem. So that means that you are going to be able to, it's super clunky, but you'll be able to get the USB dongle and then plug a USB hub into the USB port, and then you can have 7 USB ports if you want.
You have to carry around the USB hub. And USB hubs are horrible, bulky, ugly things which litter your table, and if you have to carry that around with an extra plug, you lose the benefit of having such a thin laptop. It's kind of silly. I think the other reason is they've really gone, because they've gone for the Broadwell M type chipset from Intel, which is the lower power one, and I think they're really trying to maximize the battery. And so take away all the ports, take away as much as possible to, like, they've taken away the glowing apple on the back of the screen and replaced it with an iPad-like black shiny one. And that is, just save a little bit of power right there. The thing I do like about this new machine is it comes in 3 different colors. And I think that's something that everybody has wanted since the MacBook white and black model.
Yeah.
You don't
Sam, you had a black MacBook, didn't you?
I did. I was holding back. Yeah, I had. It kind of still goes. Its fan's broken. You have to take. If you run it without the battery in, you can get about an hour out of it before it overheats.
There's another link with the new MacBook then, which hasn't got a fan. That's the other thing, is the new MacBook doesn't have a fan.
Yeah.
It runs the Broadwell M. Anyway.
There we go. So
we can talk about this forever.
It does sound like we could go through it. Let's just go for the quick ask here then. I think I know the answers. Adam, are you going to get one?
No.
Sam, you going to get one?
No.
I'm not either. There we go.
But bring multicolor and multiple USB-C ports to the MacBook Pro line, and we'll talk.
And we'll talk. I think I, like a lot of people, I've come to this conclusion. I was trying to summarize there, but we failed. But I think, like a lot of people, the plastic kind of Intel MacBook version 2.1, the 2-1 model, that's the one that I think we all had one. I really just would like another one of those, please, with like a modern CPU in it, just exactly the same, Ethernet, all the ports. I don't even want the big screen, just another one of those boxes, please, for another decade. That'd be fine. But yeah.
Well, I think you're a MacBook Air guy, Scott. I think you'd go for a MacBook Air next.
Seeing as we're massively off topic anyway, before we move away, just on the subject of Retina screens, you can't see the pixels on them with your eyes, which is, conceptually for me, I'm always aware that, like my research in the past was based on the fact that we're looking at pixels here, blah blah. But you can't see the pixels anymore on a Retina screen. But I was at my brother's house and he had I brought this up and he's got a little plastic thing he got on Kickstarter. I'll have to plunder this next week. It's a little lens that you stick onto your mobile device camera, and it makes it into a super zoom, like about 25 times.
Oh yeah.
And with that, we were able to take. He had a mobile device that's made by Sony. I don't know which one it was, and it also has impossibly small pixels. But by taking it in turns, we were able to take photos with our devices of the other screen's pixels. So I have seen the Retina screen pixels kind of remotely via other tiny pixels.
Hurrah!
Just while we're off topic, I thought I'd bring that up.
Excellent stuff. Moving on to topic, Steinberg have released a new audio interface, which requires a port that doesn't exist on the new Macs. So it's the Steinberg UR242, which is a 4x2 USB 2 audio interface. It has 2 D preamps on it, which are Yamaha built preamps, and 192 kilohertz support as well at 24 bits. So pretty good spec box there. So 24-bit 192K, the preamps as well. There is a DSP Mix FX, which is a latency-free hardware monitoring for the system as well. Also an FX suite on board as well, with onboard DSP processing as well in there as well. Drivers for everything you'd want, and also it does support the iPad connectivity control as well.
They're really catching up,
So
Steinberg.
the
The first audio interfaces when Steinberg and Yamaha got together, they were not particularly convincing, but this is starting to look good.
This is a great looking kit. Something that's really cool. Are you ready for this one?
No.
It has. Here we go. No. This will. You won't get this first of all, and then when you think about it, you will. It has a DC power inline.
DC power inline.
Yeah, so you don't need to plug it into a computer. You can plug this into the power,
Yeah.
And then run. And then use the preamps, or use the monitoring, or use the FX processing as a standalone unit.
But how do you configure it all without connecting it to a computer? Oh!
Is it just going to remember the last settings on there?
Yeah,
in terms
just
of
but it's not like a Muti where you can actually go into the system while it's not plugged in and still configure it.
Yeah. Have you ever tried to do that?
Well, I know it's probably harder than you know, something I can't think of right now.
Yes.
One thing
it's where you have to hold in certain dials and then turn them in different directions depending on what things you want to do, none of which is documented on the panel at all.
Well, some people like programming Yamaha DX7s, so, you know, that's an improvement. The one problem is, Scott, the link in the notes at theaudiopodcast.co.uk/show/144 goes nowhere.
No, I think it's been fixed. There was just an element
fixed. Oh, maybe I haven't.
Yeah, you haven't refreshed your page.
I haven't refreshed my page.
Good shout, Adam. Thanks for that.
Bad shout. Yeah.
Can I talk about pixels again? It is relevant this time.
Okay then.
So the first news item was the Trax Live software, and that has a recommended screen resolution of 1024 by 768, which means that it would run on an older monitor, perhaps, if you want to have multiple monitors connected to your laptop, if you had the ability to do that. This Steinberg are recommending a display of 1280 by 800, which you might think, well, no problem, everything's got that easy, but not everything has that easy. You know, you can't run it on your second monitor if you've got an old monitor plugged in. So, pixels, there you go. I'll shut up.
Nice work.
And next week on the Pixels blog, starring Sam Freeman. Let's go to the feature, guys.
We take the feature. So it's the continuation of my series about how to consider creating an audio installation specification for somebody. So last week we talked about the kind of overarching of handling 3 weeks ago, whenever it was, we talked about the overarching how you handle the client and start to understand the relationship. And today I thought it'd be fun to just consider, just very briefly, the discussion, which I like to summarize as either snakes or packets. So one of the big decisions that you generally have to make fairly early on, or at least kind of establish what you think is going to be the best solution, is whether you want to go with analog cabling in the wall, or, as Sam's alluded to, whether you want to go with RJ45 in the wall and then use some sort of Ethernet-based connectivity to provide that stuff. Now, the summary of it is that the cable installation is much cheaper if you go Ethernet, because then you're running a single Ethernet cable, and in fact, any sort of new building will probably have that all put in place as a default anyway. And that's nice as an installation. It's lazy and it's cheap, and it does work. But my summary would be it's a bad idea, and it's a much better idea to stick with a proper audio specialized cable installation with XLR patch bays coming out into the room that you're in. And the reason for that is just simply that the audio XLR cabling, which I like to think of as being kind of the termination boxes for the snakes, that stuff will generally last 30 to 50 years, whereas a RJ45 Ethernet-based system, the odds of that the box that you're going to plug into that working for 50 years is 0. And in fact, there's a good chance that in 10 years' time, the standard will have moved on to something else, and you'll be looking at completely recabling.
USB-C.
Yeah, exactly. So my advice to everybody is always to go the audio route. The other thing is it's also a lot simpler. So most people can work out how to use an XLR patch bay on a wall to get signal going where they want it to go. If you present them with an Ethernet socket, it's a lot harder for people to work out what to do next.
And Scott, can I ask you?
Yep.
The Ethernet setups that you'd get in a new building are obviously meant for networking between computers. Does that impact audio performance?
No, it won't, as long as there's two considerations. First of all, the quality of the cable. A lot of people forget that there is different categories of Cat. So we often refer to Cat5 cable, but in fact there's Cat6e, which is the gigabit rated version. So you'd want the highest rated, high rated cable in there. And the second consideration, which makes a lot more difference, is if you don't have a direct patch bay, which allows you to just physically connect 2 ports in the room to each other, and you have to pass everything through a router or a switch, then you need to make sure that that switch is actually up to the job, because pushing live audio from one end of the room to the other end of the room for a network switch is very demanding on the switch. So you need to make sure the switch is actually up to the job. And if you went for a digital solution, then whichever solution you went to will give you a list of these are switches that we have tested and are happy with the performance of. And you're inevitably going to find that those are not the cheap switches. They are going to be the kind of, So it's that kind of thing where you save a couple of £100 in cabling and then discover that you've actually then spent £1,000 on a switch and the breakout boxes for either side of the Ethernet cabling. And then it's like...
But you get benefits. There are other benefits of going for the Ethernet, though, because surely it's a bit more flexible in how you route things and...
Well, so the kind of benefits you do get, and a system that I've been involved in putting in somewhere, a system I put in place for somewhere, just one time I've done it so far, is we put an X32 rack beside the switch, and we made it so that you would go from the breakout through the Ethernet to the mixer, and then you control the mixer from an iPad from anywhere else around the place. So that had no physical desk at all. There was no physical desk in that system at all. The entire kind of audio mixing is going to be done soft because it was a conference environment. So we specified that kind of solution, and that's nice. It's really super elegant and neat, and it's pretty much idiot-proof in terms of that. Also, that place was running on the idea that they were going to generally replace its sort of, they were looking for 5 to 10 years maximum, and then they expected to replace everything again. So I was like, that's the kind of timescale where it's okay. For me, it was really important. I stressed them massively. I was like, in 5 years' time, you're going to need to replace this. And if you're happy to do that, then you can take the solution, because it does give you there are lots of cool advantages. And they were glad to get rid of the control room space because they got rid of that completely. And I thought that was cool. But it's
like what you said in your last in the last part. It's about expectations, and expectations are more than just we'll have a shiny new system that will work. It's also about the future and about fitting the solution to the actual need and the actual space.
Yeah.
So there we go.
That's only so. So I think to summarize it is I generally go in with the default being analog cabling in, and that's done. One of the bizarre features of the analog cabling in is that you could jerry-rig an RJ45 connector on that if you wanted to. You kill the rest of the multi-core, but you can actually send RJ45 down it if you wish. It's a higher specification cable. But then secondly, if you're going to suggest to somebody they go to digital solution for pushing the audio from one end of the room to the other end of the room, then that is a really gutsy call to make, and you've either got to have I'm going to run away a long way strategy, or else you're going to be expecting to support that. And retrofitting multi-core cabling into a room is a lot more expensive than putting it in the wall in the first instance. It's the classic, isn't it, where it's like there's no wall, it's really easy to put a cable into it. Now there's a wall, it's really hard work to put a cable into it. Even if it's properly kind of partitioned, it's still hard. So there you go. So that's my suggestion. I'd advise snakes. Maybe some of our listeners think I'm a complete dinosaur and I should be going for whiz-bang digital solutions. In which case, you could send us an email, or if you wanted to, or kind of Facebook us or Twitter us to that effect if you want to. And you can find all those contact details at theaudiopodcast.co.uk/show/144.
Very good. Thank you, Scott. Is there going to be another part to this?
Yeah, I'm sure we'll keep finding parts. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, I was going to say body parts. That sounds
exactly.
wrong. Okay, and then before we head into our final section, any of you guys want to suggest what is in my camera this week?
I've been thinking about this. I can see that you've got buttons, knobs, and the buttons are labelled Save, Load, Record Utility, Sample, Program, Something, and FX. There's makes me think, and there's I can see the edge of a LCD display there. I think it's a sampler, but I don't know which one. And it's blue-faced.
Yamaha. Is it a Yamaha sampler?
It's not a Yamaha sampler, but it is a sampler. I mean, it says sample on it, so yes, it's a sampler of some kind. This is a tricky one, actually, because...
Is it an Akai sampler, AKI?
It's an Akai sampler.
Yeah. If it wasn't Yamaha, it had to be Akai.
Well, also Emu did samplers, don't forget that.
Yeah, that's not an Emu
It doesn't
sampler.
look like an Emu, though. That's not with those knobs.
But it doesn't look like a normal old-school Akai either, does it?
Well, no, but...
Okay, so using process of elimination, how can you figure out which sampler this is?
Without Google, I just wait until you tell us.
Yeah.
Okay, this is actually the faceplate of a Z8 sampler. And this is so that's why it's tricky, because it's not. This isn't actually the module. This is like a detachable.
Look at that.
It's a detachable part which has all the controls on it and connects to the main module. So, so there you go. It had
Turn it over. Let's see the back of it then.
The back of it.
Yeah.
It's just
classic audio. So it's just kind of like what you'd have on an old car or not so old car stereo kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's got a DIN port to plug into the main unit there, and if I move it along a bit, you can see a few more things. There's the Akai logo in the bottom. Had a little brother called the Z4, and the Z4 didn't have the removable panel. That was all done on the front. On the front panel of it, but
what sort of vintage is this? How old is it? When was this?
This is
July 02.
This is this is post. This is the model they released after the S5000, 6000. The 6000 had a removable faceplate as well. 2496 possible. Was it 2496? Yeah, 2496 sampling. It's got a hard drive inbuilt, USB connector for extra storage or to plug a keyboard in, inbuilt effects, ADAT board option or multiple analog output option. Yeah.
Does it still work?
It does still work. I've just plumbed it into. Well, I haven't plumbed it in yet, but I've put it in my rack. So I'm not going to show you my rack because otherwise you'll be able to spot some other things which will help you in future weeks. But yeah, it's in the rack. It should work fine. I have to get a replacement cable to connect the faceplate. I've ordered that already. And the interesting thing about this sampler was they made it with kind of stock elements. So it has a stock mini DIN connector to connect the faceplate. It used standard SD RAM from a computer rather than a special type of RAM, so it made it a bit easier to upgrade.
So how everyone? I have the price. I have the Sound and Sound article for it. So there's the Sound and Sound review from July 02 in front of me, which has the price. Do you guys want to have a guess how much it was?
Well, I read the review recently. So
oh, that's not good. That's how we can't play this game then.
I think I might have forgotten how much it is though.
Have you got a contemporary price though? What's the resale?
Oh no, I don't know what the contemporary price is. It was just shy of $2,000 new. Is that it there?
1999, and that was with either a digital board or an analog board installed, I think. And the Z4 was like 1,500.
No, 1,300 for the Z4 and 1,899 for the Z8. So just shy of $2,000. How about that?
No, see, actually, I like this sampler a lot, but I'm keeping my eye out for a Yamaha A5000 sampler, which is similar kind of vintage, maybe just slightly older, but an interesting one. It had a slightly different sample topography.
Ooh.
So there we go.
A5000, yeah, man, they were amazing machines.
Join us next week, and I'll probably have another piece of my studio on the camera.
Okay, and let's head into the Plunder. Let's keep going. Let's head straight into the Plunder here. First of all, one item for myself here. CNN has an article about the dangers of hearing loss from exposure to loud music. You're like, yeah, whatever, Scott. We all know that. With a particular focus on the in-ear earbuds.
This is perennial. This has been. I remember being about 10 years old and then saying, "Don't put your headphones on too loud." Yeah, public service, innit? Tell people that you're going to break your ears. I've got even more camera-based stuff, but for the audio podcast listeners, I'm now holding up in front of my camera the my little earbuds that I take when I go to any loud music events. They are linear frequency response molded things. Pop in there and basically turn the volume down by about 20 dB, but without muffling it, which is quite nice.
Yeah. Well, the CNN article, though, makes the point that you should probably listen to less than 1 hour of your mobile device on full volume in your ears. So if you have a tendency to listen to your iPod on full volume, then anything more than an hour a day is probably very bad for your head.
Actually, I think I've not got it loaded right now, but my interpretation was never more than 60% volume, and even then only for an hour.
Oh, well, yes, no, I think that was that was yes. I'm communicating the really you shouldn't do this, and you're communicating the what you should do, aren't you? Yes, that's.
And of course, I suppose I will put this tip forward. If you get some good headphones with noise reduction, noise cancelling, then you can actually turn down the volume of your device as well. It just automatically happens because you don't have to overcome the sound from outside. So I have my tasty AKG noise cancelling headphones. You can have the in-ear type that seal the ports. Up to you, but those help, I would suggest.
So even passive, I've got the in-ear ones that I use are on-stage monitor type ones, so they're designed so that you can hear what you're doing without the outside noise stopping it. So they kind of act like air defenders as well as putting sound through, so you can run them much less loud. Okay, more Plunder. Plunder from me. This was my friend Ben posted this towards me at some point this week. He's a guitarist, and on Premier Guitar there is an article that points towards the idea and the existence of multi-track masters in the wild. So it's a brief discussion of the ability and to listen to classic recordings such as Beatles and Rolling Stones stuff, but with be able to hear the individual tracks, so being able to solo the guitars or whatever. It's there to read. It's interesting.
And that comes about because of games like Rock Band and Guitar Hero and that kind of thing.
Well, that's the theory they're offering, isn't it? I'm saying essentially somebody's got a hold of the multi-track masters and put them online. So
and probably because they became available for the game developers at some stage in the recent past. Yeah.
And I wonder if what format and quality audio file they use for those games. If they actually just use a very high MP3, or if they're actually doing 1644 WAV or AIF, considering that you have to download a lot of those games or download updates to them, I'd go for as small as possible. But I don't know. Is there anything about that?
Not in this article. That would require further research, I think.
Good.
I thought it was a cool piece of Plunder in that it's a nice article that reminds us, and I suspect that a lot of our listeners was already aware of, was the fact that in the same way that there's large amounts of MP3 music floating around the place that you should pay for and you can get without paying for it illegally, there are also multi-track masters floating around the internet which you can pay for as well. Though I am prompted to think it's appropriate for us to remind everybody of the Cambridge Music the website where you can get multi-track masters legitimately for free.
Yes, yeah. I point students listen to everything all the time.
In next week's Plunder, we'll put it in next week's Plunder as
next week's Plunder, I say. That's a good link to do. Now, talking of research, if you're into music research, music technology research, or any kind of research like that, we've got a book recommendation for you, and that is the book Audio Culture.
Cox and Daniel Warner's Audio Culture: Readings in Modern Music.
Modern music. Now, of course, I read this because, of course, we've all done PhDs. We're all doctors here on the audio podcast. And I don't think I got all the way through this, but I read most of this book. And what's interesting about this book, what I think is a good book to start on, is that it covers such a wide ground. It covers lots of classic texts, classic music ideas, experimental music ideas, music technology ideas, and from people who you might have also recognized the names of. So they're not, there'll be some obscure things in there, but you've got abridged articles by Brian Eno, John Cage, John Zorn, and then people who are important in the development of music and music technology who you might not have heard of, like R. Murray Schafer, Pierre Schaeffer, and people kind of like that. I know that, Scott, you said you read this book.
Yes, I read it as well quite a number of years ago, but I did read it, and it's certainly worth it. You're absolutely right, and that provides a nice way of getting a broad kind of contextualization of a whole load of material. So that's
I mean, it covers futurist in music, which was kind of like World War One kind of time, experimental music, music concrete, ambient music, open form music, and even stuff like Plunder phonics and dub, and it's nicely done. Basically, each chapter is either a full or abridged article, classic article on the subject that it's about.
Cool.
And worth checking out.
Awesome stuff. There we go. And I think that brings us to the end of the Plunder, does it not?
And to the end of the show, which is good because I've used 92% of my battery during this show. I didn't plug it in at the beginning. So.
You'd have trouble if you were using a MacBook with only one USB-C port.
Real talk. Okay. So don't forget, you can subscribe to the audio podcast you can get us on iTunes, YouTube, Gpodder, Stitcher, and other things as well, actually. But we haven't updated our subscribe link, so we'll get that done in this coming week. But we're kind of increasingly all over the place, which is cool. That's awesome stuff.
Don't forget you can contact us as well.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
show@theaudiopodcast.co.uk for email, and Twitter @theaudiopodcast.
That is indeed the case. So this has been the Audio Podcast, show 144, Tap Trio Treat. I've been Scott Hewitt.
I'm Samuel Freeman.
And I am, and shall continue to be, Adam Yonch. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.